Subscribe to our YouTube channel and don't forget to press the bell icon to get all the latest updates.
The study is a tribute to the healthcare workers who gave up their life during the pandemic. We are all aware that all around the world, people have died, especially people in the healthcare field. And that includes nurses, doctors, attenders, radiologists, pharmacists, physiotherapists, and so on. 2 months ago, on the 29th of April, I had given a tribute to the healthcare workers of the world who passed away, and that ran into 173 pages of work, and I had added the lessons learned from the deaths, because at that time, considering it was 2 months ago, we did not have so much information as we have now. At that time, the disease had just entered India, and it was basically running through the big cities. In Indore, it had hit, and so had it hit in Nellore and in parts of Tamil Nadu. Now, the information I have is from responsible media who've been really following the stories and reporting it in real time for the rest of us, the general public as a doctor. So this work that I put out on Doctors' Day, that's July 1st, was a tribute to the healthcare workers of India, specifically the doctors of India, on whom responsible media have written about in detail in individual cases. But we don't have the big picture. When we read an individual case, we feel their pain, we feel the family's pain, we feel the discomfort the doctor went through, the despair. But when we put all the information together, it gives you a whole different picture. And that is what I did for Doctors' Day for the doctors. It is basically a tribute. It is not a scientific publication. It is not about, who is COVID positive or not, because I'm not in a position to find out the serology result, the PCR result, the post-mortem results of individuals. All I have are the reports of media. And I must congratulate and thank my media colleagues friends from all over the country who have really done a fabulous job in reporting this. And this reporting includes candid interviews, which I have included, and people who I have contacted have given me their messages. They have sent me their family pictures and have explained to me who this is, what the grandmother's name was, and how they all survived. So there are success stories, there are stories of survival, there are stories of recovery, and then there are tragic stories as well. So doctors don't work alone. We work as a team, and I've always had tremendous respect for all my colleagues in the healthcare field. That includes nurses whom I keep friendships for ever since my medical school days, and I've maintained those friendships. And as I was writing the article, I reached out to each one of them and I said, look, can you tell me about tragedies that may have happened among your fraternity? And surprisingly, none of them were aware of any tragedies in their field. And that was a revelation. And I also reached out to the doctors in my contact list, my friends, my acquaintances. And I would say about 1% of them wrote back and said, yeah, I think I heard about someone dying. And then there were 3 or 4 doctors who really understood the depth of my question. And there were, I think, 4 of them, and 3 of them were my women friends, and 1 was a senior male friend of mine, all of whom are based in Kerala. because I practice in Kerala, and they sent me a whole bunch of information. So, getting support is good when people send you information, and you also get a feel that you're working together. And so, the revelation was that all the healthcare fraternity, we are all living in a bubble. We imagine ourselves to be safe, perhaps, maybe on relative terms that death may not happen. So this is a wake-up call for everyone to understand that over 100 doctors have died in our country. And I wrote about 100 doctors who died in Italy. And I wrote out important lessons from them. Now they have come as published papers, but I wrote this back in April. So this is not about fearing or losing hope or becoming pessimistic. It's about clarity. It's about understanding the process. It's about the big picture. I always believe in the big picture, and I believe I provided that to the best extent. And I must also add the role of social media. Remember, mainstream media can only reach so many people, but social media is one of the sources of information. But unfortunately, the credibility of that information is difficult to verify. What surprised me were, number one, the number of people who passed away. I had a ballpark figure of around 30, 35 people. That may be a stretch when I started. I thought I'll collect the details of these individuals and see what I can learn from them. But as I went about my task, the number crossed 100, and I added one more after Doctor's Day. A young doctor passed away, and I just had to include him as well because it was a confirmed death. And the number hit 106 on my list of doctors, and about 25 healthcare workers, most of whom were nurses. And the striking part of the statistic, apart from the enormity of the number, was the age distribution. As we are all aware, when the news about COVID-19 came out back in February, when it affected everyone, it was seen as an old man's disease. People who were old would succumb to it, and there was a general feeling among the youth that, hey, if you are less than 60 years or 50 years of age, you're not going to die. But that has been proved wrong, not only by this list or this project that I did, but with the recently released statistics, predominantly from Maharashtra and also from Uttar Pradesh. 60% of deaths in India, reported statistics, officially published statistics, indicate that they were under the age of 60. In other words, the majority of deaths occur in younger people. By younger, I mean below age of 60 is when people actively work, when they don't retire. Generally, we'll take retirement age as 60. So I picked that age, and below 60, we find about 60 to even some statistics even say 70% of deaths have occurred in the age group. Now, that does not mean that all those who die are young people or that older people are safe. It simply means that there are a lot of young people in India, and I don't know if you're aware that India, our average age is only 29. 29 is India's citizens' average age. So that is reflected in the statistics, and that is true for healthcare workers as well. The fact to know about older people is that the older you are, the absolute mortality risk will be higher, which means that the odds of dying would be higher if an older person gets it. That is the reason why doctors recommend that older people take extra care and be protected from exposure to the virus. So I wanted to make that clear. When commonly when statistics is misinterpreted, people look at some graphs and say, "Hey, it's a young person's disease." And yesterday, an architect, a very senior architect, called me and said, "Hey, I heard that only young people are dying. Can we go out?" I said, "Well, I need to explain a couple of things to you. The 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 probability of an older person dying is higher, even though the total numbers are lower." So I hope that makes sense. I planned a tribute when I made the study, and along with the tribute, I needed to learn about the families, about how the doctor worked, how they got the disease, and what their experience was with the disease, and how they passed away. As an academician, I'm primarily an academician, I need to know. So that was the intention when I started. But as I mentioned in my previous work from 2 months ago, in Italy, there were a couple of cases that stood out. There was a nurse who was barely 22 who was murdered by her boyfriend because the boyfriend believed that she gave him the virus. And I had given her details in my previous work, which is linked on this document. There was another case where a young Italian nurse killed herself. And there was a very well publicized case of a young 48-year-old dynamic young woman who was the head of the emergency services in America, in the US. She just came home one day and killed herself. She said she could not take it. She could not bear to see the suffering. Now, these are not individuals who are known to have an established psychiatric illness. Especially the case from the US is very well reported, very beautifully documented, tragically. But I have enough documentation from that case that showed me that this is not just a virus and a few lungs that were destroyed. This pandemic is affecting people in more ways than we think it is. So on the one hand, we have the people who suffocate to death. Their lungs are destroyed by their own immune system. So it is not the virus that is destroying the lungs, it's the immune response that is destroying the lungs. An abnormal, a huge, or what they call a cytokine storm is destroying the lungs, and blood is clotting in various parts of the body, and various organs are affected. There's clot in the blood vessel to the lungs, which means you could be looking just fine and drop dead the next moment. So these things have happened. So it is not just a lung disease. That's my point. And the theme of my article was death in the times of COVID. It's a little philosophical. Death during the times of COVID, which includes violent deaths. And there were a couple of doctors who died. They were in their, one of them was 23. She was from Tamil Nadu. She had just finished her COVID duty and was traveling on a two-wheeler and was killed on the spot. And then there was a young doctor who was only 52, and he had just, he used a cycle to go to work, and his car could not be serviced. So he was so dedicated, he had to go to work, and he chose to ride a cycle to work, and he was riding home after the COVID duty, and he was killed by a rogue car rider who could not be traced. So the point here is, lives are lost, and I don't really have a sense of how many lives were taken by the virus, but directly or indirectly, a lot of people have died, and this has happened all over the world. This is not an India problem or an Italy problem. It has happened all over the world, and all these lives are important. They all have families, and all of these families have been devastated. So this is a tribute. seeing the world through somebody else's eyes. So that is the primary limitation. So when I see the world through a responsible media person's eye, I feel a lot more confident. But when I see the world through an anonymous social media post, I have gone through hours and hours of verification processes, including phone calls to known and unknown people to find out if such a thing happened. And the process has earned me some friends. But back to your question, verifying the credibility of information is extremely difficult. And specifically, knowing what the cause of death was. So I will not pretend to know the cause of death in all the people. I have reported what other people have reported and whose data I believe was credible. But the limitation is, even if I believe it's credible, there will be some error at the source. And it may be an inadvertent error. It may be a wrong lab result. It may be a test result that was pending and was never found. It may be an autopsy report that never came. So we must not look at it as though it is a list of COVID positive people. I have made a very sincere request on my project, on my article itself. It is not a list of people who had COVID infection. It is people who passed away. Let's give them that respect, and let's spend a couple of moments remembering those families, and let's learn from these lives and their experiences.